Okay, so Lexi's doing good. Jane King, the daughter of Carla Richards, again, I don't know anything there. Kathy Cochran, and then Glenda Shepard. Anybody else that you can think of? Don't see anybody. So we got 38 verses today, and you know me. The only thing good about it is that if the Lord's willing, I will be teaching next Sunday also. And again, for those of you that came in late, thank you, Pat. This is one of those lessons that you do as I say, not as I do, because I can guarantee you that I can't do half of the stuff that's supposed to be done. We are in 1 Samuel. The reason we're in 1 Samuel is because Kenny exercised his power and took 1st and 2nd Thessalonians. That's what I wanted to teach on. I thought that 1st and 2nd Thessalonians would be very apropos in the situation our country finds itself in. And when that didn't work, I was asked, what's the last thing that you taught on? And I went back, and in 2016, Bob and I taught on 1st and 2nd Samuel. And that was back when we didn't have women in our class. I don't know, you remember that, Dennis? That was great, wasn't it? That was really, I remember you being pretty ecstatic about it, if I can recall. So, and that was because of Bob Perry. And if you want to know what's wrong with our church right now, we don't have more Bob Perrys. Because Bob Perry didn't care whose feelings he hurt. It was, let's get it done, and we're going to get these men together, and we're going to talk as men talk. And therefore, here comes one of my favorite people, too. Come in here, young lady. Watch these lights here with those glasses. You may trip over something. So Pat got you into this last week. And if you're going to understand what's happening in the first part of Samuel, where we are now, you've got to understand the context. You've got to know why the Old Testament, particularly this part of the Old Testament, is important to us as believers now. Because I get this all the time. People say, why do you even study the Old Testament? All I want to know is what Jesus did after he got here and what he's going to do for me down the road. And of course, the whole thing with the Old Testament is it always points towards Jesus. And you have to understand that the people back then were just as bad as the people now. And that's why Pat last week started talking about Judges. And I shouldn't presume this, though. Let's just presume there's one person in this class that isn't familiar with what the book of Judges really talks about. So I'm going to try to hit it in about 2 or 3 minutes. But to understand it, you have to also understand what God said to his chosen people when he got them out of slavery in Egypt. And so I'm going to give you some sites. You can write them down if you want to. If you don't have to, of course. But the first one is Exodus 21 through 6. I'm not going to read it all. I'm just going to pick some parts out. And this is God, of course, talking to his chosen people, telling them what he expects out of them. And the reason I'm picking this part is because it's relevant with Judges. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an idol or any likeness of what is in heaven above or on earth beneath or in the water under the earth. You shall not worship them or serve them. And that's just part, of course, of the commandments, but that's broad enough to hit just about anything when it talks about, I expect you to worship me because I'm the God that got you out of where you were after 400 years of slavery. I'm the God that's going to take you to the promised land. And so that's one of the instructions that he had. And then Moses followed up in Deuteronomy, and this one, again, I'm just going to pick part of it, but it's Deuteronomy 28, 16 through 26. First couple of sentences say, but it shall come about, if you do not obey the Lord your God, to observe to do all his commandments and all his statutes with which I charge you today, that all of these curses will become upon you. And then if you want to not have to go to a horror movie to be scared, just read this part of Deuteronomy and see all of the curses that God said, I'm going to put on my chosen people if they do a lot of things that I don't want them to do, particularly if they obey some other God, because there is no other God. And I think we understand that. Then let me get into Joshua. One of my favorite people was Joshua. I really look forward to seeing him. Moses was not allowed to enter the promised land, and Joshua took over. And the main thing about the book of Joshua was, be strong and courageous. And if there's anything we as believers need to be at this point in time, is strong and courageous, because the world is falling apart around us, in my opinion. And it used to be the world was way far away from us, but now the world is next door. And you just don't know what's going to happen, and people are different now than they were when I was younger. So let's look at what Joshua said. So the Lord gave Israel all of the land which he had sworn to give to their fathers, and they possessed it and lived in it. And the Lord gave them rest on every side. Wouldn't that be wonderful to have complete rest? According to all that he had sworn to their fathers, and no one of all of their enemies stood before them. The Lord gave all of their enemies unto their hand, and one of the good promises which the Lord had made to the house of Israel failed. Not one of the good promises failed. All came to pass. So why am I telling you all this? Because this is the way it started. And this is what, in my business, I often have to advise people about how to maintain wealth over multiple generations. And the stock answer I give them is don't even try it. Because generally the generation below you doesn't understand what you did to acquire what you have and to save what you have. And the only relevance that has to what we're talking about today is we're going to see that there was a limited period of time that the people of Israel would get back on the right track with God, and then older people like us would start dying off, and the younger ones weren't doing the same thing that we were doing, and it started going downhill. So we have what is called the cycle of sin. And we've got, I want to be sure which Judges, excuse me. This is in Judges 2:14 through 23. Again, I'm not reading it all, but it says, this is the people of Israel. Now, these are God's chosen people. They were in great distress. Then the Lord raised up judges, which they were in great distress because they quit obeying God. The Lord raised up judges who saved them out of the hands of these raiders. In other words, these Canaanites were coming and getting them. Yet they would not listen to their judges, but prostituted themselves to other gods and worshiped them. Unlike their fathers, they quickly turned away from the way which their fathers had walked, the way of obedience to the Lord's commands. So this starts it. This is what happens to the people of Israel. As one generation dies off, they quit doing what that generation did to obey God and to obey the commands. And you get into these judges that are people, and they aren't legal judges, which is probably pretty good because they didn't get all tied up in legality as far as that goes. But they're people of good people typically. One kind of got to be a judge because he killed off, I think, did I put that down here? I can't remember who that was. I thought one of them wasn't actually appointed by Jesus because something happened. By God, I can't remember exactly what it was. But one of the interesting things when you look at the list of judges is you see two names that we're going to talk about today. Oh my goodness gracious. I honestly believe this is it, guys. This is the rapture. I'm telling you. Bill, it is great to see you and your submissive wife with you. I appreciate that. It is good to see you. Don't be like Sharon Jarvis, please now. You're the straight man. I get to tell the jokes, okay? No, it is good. It is good to see you, like it's good to see everybody. And so we're talking about the people of Israel, which again have a direct relevance to us, which I'll discuss in just a second, and how they fell out of favor with God. And it's a never-ending spiral. It covered over 350 years, I believe is the estimate, that these folks that were the chosen people started out fine. Then the older generation dies off. The younger generation says, we don't need God anymore. We're going to do whatever we want to do. God then turns the people around them, they're loose, and lets them come in, put them into captivity for a while until they plead for forgiveness. God forgives them, and then the cycle starts again. And what worries me about our present situation is that I think a lot of people will say, we may be in a spiral like that, depending on how you feel about things, but I don't think that we're ever going to have all of the people in our country suddenly get religion and call on God to come save us, because we are in a minority and we need to realize that. And so it is kind of a frustrating thing, and the whole point that we're going to get to is the importance of maintaining the relationship with God that we need to have, and that's through prayer, and that's through studying the Word. And so two of the judges that are kind of interesting is one guy named Eli that we're going to talk about today, and another one named Samuel that we're going to talk about today. And a lot of people don't even think about them being considered judges as far as this goes. And also where we are right now in this book is we're getting into a transitional stage. We're getting from the point to where God has been the leader of his chosen people, and to a greater extent or less they listen to him. And now they're going to get into the malarkey, into the king's part of it, because the people aren't satisfied with God. And we'll get deeper into that, but why aren't they satisfied with God? Particularly when their forefathers, he sent in 40 years of wandering in the desert, of course they all died off, he took care of them. And he performed miracles just like Jesus performed miracles. And so you would think that they would be all ready to go on his side. But we're going to find out they aren't. If you want some sights again on them falling into this pit, it's Judges 6:16, Judges 10:6 through 9, Judges 13:1 through 5. All of those are the cycle of sin to where they get in trouble, they call on God, they then ignore God, they get back in trouble, and because of God's grace, he saves them. And then they start the process over again. How is that related to us? How do we have anything to do with what God's chosen people did back at that time, or what they're doing now, as a matter of fact? How do we have anything to do with what's going over in Gaza and all of that? Well, if you get into Romans, which is the New Testament, I think everybody knows that. And you know that Paul wrote to believers in Roman, and they were Gentile believers for the most part. And he ties us as Gentiles. Why are we Gentiles? Because we're not Jewish. That's why we're Gentiles. And he ties us into the same situation to where we have to watch out about our P's and Q's. Not that we're going to lose our salvation, but we can fall out of favor. So from Romans 1:16 through 17, here's what Paul said. For I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes, to the Jew first and also the Greek being us. For it is in the righteousness of, for in it the righteousness of God is revealed from faith to faith, as it is written, but the righteous man shall live by faith. So because of our faith in the gospel of Jesus Christ, because of the commitment we have made to that, we're being brought into a favored status. And we know that we have the assurance of knowing that we will spend eternity with the Lord. Romans 11:11 through 12. Again, this is Paul. I say then, they did not stumble so as to fall, did they? And the they being the Jews. Remembering Paul was a Jew, even though he was the apostle to the Gentiles. He says, may it never be, but by their transgression, by the transgression of the Jews, salvation has come to the Gentiles. By their transgression, in other words, their disobedience of God's command, that's when we got involved. And because of that, that's why Paul changed from trying to convince, well, he always tried to convince Jews, but he became mainly for the Gentiles. And why did Paul say that God did this? To make the Jews jealous. And so now, if their transgressions, the Jews, is riches for the world, and their failure is riches for the Gentile, how much more will their fulfillment be? So in other words, he's saying, don't give up on my chosen people. They haven't done what I want them to do, but there's going to be a remnant of them when this all comes to a head, that are going to be saved, and then they will be with us, and we will all be together in the new heaven and the new earth and the new Jerusalem. Romans 11:22. Behold then the kindness and severity of God. Two different things here. Kindness and severity. And Hannah, we're going to talk about today, is going to also talk about that. To those who fell, the Jews, severity. And to you, Gentiles, God's kindness, if you continue in his kindness. Again, we're not going to lose our salvation if we've made a heartfelt affirmation of faith, but we darn sure can get into a situation in our world that we have to live in that isn't to our liking. And that brings back the big conflict among commentators, which is, when is the rapture going to occur? When is the church, that's us, when is the church going to be taken up into the air to meet with our Lord Jesus Christ? Is it going to be before the tribulation, or is it going to be after, or is it going to be during? And I'm voting for before, and hoping it happens before I die, because I'd rather go up with y'all than die by myself. Here's Romans 11:25 through 26. For I don't want you, brethren, to be uninformed of this mystery. He's talking about Gentile believers. So that you will not be wise in your own estimation. In other words, don't get filled up with pride because you've been saved. And that he says, a partial hardening has happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in. And so all Israel will be saved. And what we know he's talking about is not all of the people of Israel, but a remnant of the people. And when is that going to happen? It's going to happen when God says it's time to send his son again. And that's when there's going to be the great white throne that we hopefully will never be before, or there's going to be the judgment seat where we get our rewards or the lack of them. Okay, that's the background. And then I actually had, if you wanted another one, I can give it to you. I won't read it. Romans 11:28 through 32. And then also I wanted to read this. And Leon, are you still my timekeeper? Okay, what do we got left? 10:21 right now? Okay, and we're going till 11, right? We've already decided we're not finishing at 15 to 11. I'm tired of that sort of stuff. So we're going to go till 11. So you just keep me going that way. Thank you. I appreciate that. I probably will be going to a Methodist church next Sunday, but I'm going to go out. I'm going to go out in a blaze of glory. So here's what you might want to read, because I really think this is so apropos. Hebrews 11, 1 through 12, and I'm going to give you just part of it here. Now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. For by it the men of old gained approval. By faith we understand that the worlds were prepared by the word of God, so that what is seen was not made out of things which were visible. By faith Abel offered to God a better sacrifice than Cain, through which he obtained the testimony that he was righteous, God testifying about his gifts, and through faith, though he is dead, he still speaks. And that's something we know. We're not going to see Jesus until the rapture. We're just not going to see him. And that we believe in him. We believe everything the Bible tells us about him. And this Old Testament is part of it. So here's what we're going to try to cover today in all of this great amount of time we have left. We're going to talk about, and I had to write this down or I would forget it, marital relations. And again, even though we have a marital counselor here with us, well, he professes to be. I think it's just because his wife puts up with him, really. But we do have a marital counselor. But I'm going to try to take his place as far as that goes. So that's one thing, marital relationship. Commitments to God, or the lack of commitments to God. Dedication of our possessions to God. This is another thing. Everything we got, every penny we got belongs to God, and we understand that. We understand that God is taking care of us, and it's our responsibility to reciprocate. Not that God needs our money, but it can be used in this sinful world that we have to spread the gospel. Then we have prayers and praises. Prayers is something I think a lot of us fail at. I certainly do. And then we have God's faithfulness to do just as he says, just as he promises. That's one of Bob Perry's favorite sayings. And it's right. So here we go. We're now getting to the word. We didn't spend that much time. I didn't deviate too much and talk about my wife and how irritable she's been lately because she had oral surgery. So if she bites your head off, understand. You know, she's got stitches. She's got a bunch of stitches in her mouth. And she's always just, you know, like that sort of stuff. And I found her the other day with a pair of scissors. I got to tell you the truth. Found her in the office the other day with a pair of scissors and a mirror, sticking them into her mouth, trying to cut these stitches out. And I said, you know, Kitty, I really think the last thing I'd be putting in my mouth where somebody has committed oral surgery on you is a pair of scissors that have been cutting somebody's toenails. And so that's where we are today, guys. Just want you to know that. Do I need a what? Yeah. I can dig myself as deep as it has to be without a new shovel, Leon. Thank you, though. All right, here we go. 1 Samuel, verse, I don't even listen to you anymore. 1 Samuel, verse 1. Now, here's something you have to know again. I'm the reason why we're studying Samuel, because they asked me what was the last thing, Bob and I did it 10 years ago about. Old Testament terrifies me because of the names. I cannot pronounce the names the way I think they're supposed to be pronounced. But I'm telling you right now, there's not a one of you here that knows how they're really supposed to be pronounced. So don't judge me when I talk bad about names or I skip them altogether, as I'm prone to do quite often. Okay, here we go. Number 1. Now there was a certain man from a town that you don't even care about, and I'm not going to try to pronounce the name, from the hill country of Ephraim. I do want to be sure we talk about that. And his name was, and here's the thing that confuses me because I get many commentators do it different. They say, really stress the first part first. So you have Elkanai or something like that. So I just call him Elkanai or something. I'll call him every name in the book. What you need to know about this guy, you'll never hear anything else about him in the Word except for Chronicles. And in Chronicles, it goes through the listing, which is partly done here, and it shows that he was a Levite. Y'all know what Levites were? Yeah, y'all know what Levites were. They were from the tribe of Levi. And the tribe of Levi was the priestly tribe. And so first thing when you see that is you start coming in here and you say, oh, wait a minute now, is this guy a priest? And the answer is no, he's not. And you'll find out pretty quickly that he's not too. So it talks about he's the son of Jeroham, son of all these people, and that's just showing that he is a Levite from that. Now, you come in here and you say, well, okay, what's important about number 1? What's important about number 1 is that he is living in the promised land. He does have a history, a heredity history of being a Levite, may or may not be a priest at this particular point in time. But it kind of gives you an idea that he's not a heathen. And so that's the first thing that we're seeing here in that number 1. Well, when you get to number 2, the light starts coming on. And what does number 2 says? Number 2 says he had 2 wives. The name of one was Hannah. I love names like that. Was Hannah. And the other was Peninnah. Peninnah, I'm going to call her. And Peninnah had children. Okay, why do we care about that? Well, that's because they were this guy's children. And that's relevant from a standpoint of the way the rules were back then as far as inheritance is concerned. And the need to keep your name going after you have died. But how does it end? It comes in there and says, but Hannah had no children. So now you've got a gentleman that's from a priestly tribe that has 2 wives. Is that what God wants? No, that's not what God wants. Genesis tells us it's one man and one woman that leave their parents and cleave together as one flesh. That's what God intended. But like a lot of things in the world, God will, even though things are happening that he didn't intend, will allow them to happen. Now, does he know how they're going to turn out? Yeah, he knows how they're going to turn out. Do the people involved, the humans involved? No, they don't know. So he's going to let this happen. So we've got 2 of them. We got one wife that has kids. We got one wife that doesn't have kids. Well, what's the relationship of the husband with his 2 wives? Well, you get into the theory, well, not a theory, I need to be careful. You get into history a little bit. Has there ever been a relationship with a husband that had multiple wives that turned out really good? Well, 99% of them didn't. One that we start out with is a guy named Abraham. And Abraham was married to a woman named Sarah. God changed their names later. And Sarah was barren. She couldn't have kids. And they were older than the hills. They were older than Dennis Jarvis. And therefore, here comes somebody from God who says, guess what, Abraham? You're going to be the father of many nations. And thank goodness, because we're a part of that. And so you get into a situation where how does that happen? Well, it happens when God wants it to happen. And this is one of those things I'm not qualified to speak on, number one, because I'm not a woman. But number two, because I don't have any kids. And so there's not one shred of paternal desire in me to have children. And I'm sure that is very upsetting to some people, but that's just the way it is. I've never been that way. And so it's hard for me to understand the importance of having children, particularly when a lot of our friends that have grandchildren have abandoned us because they want to be with the grandchildren all the time. And so that's just part of life. And so you look at this situation, you say, okay, Abraham has a wife that can't have babies. Well, what do? They pray to God, right? Every day they pray to God. Well, no, wait a minute now. Word doesn't say that. What they say is Sarah says to her husband, you need to find you a woman so you can have some babies. And it just so happens I've got a maid named Hagar, and I think she'd be just fine. And so what was the result of that union of Abraham and the maid Hagar? Yeah. It was a situation to where they're still fighting the battle. They're still fighting the battle, and unfortunately we get involved in it. And it's only going to change when God decides it's time for it to change. So even though Abraham was deemed righteous in God's sight because of his belief in God, and he was willing to pick up his family and move to the promised land that he didn't even know about, but still he and his wife made bad decisions. They're human, just like the rest of us. Well, another one that did it was Jacob. And Jacob, is the father of the 12 tribes of Israel. They changed, in fact, his name to Israel at some point in his life. And so he had Leah, which is kind of interesting. Leah's his first wife and Rachel's his second wife, and they're sisters. And the only reason he married Leah was because Leah's dad, because she was older than Rachel, wanted her to marry first. That isn't who he loved. And yet, instead of saying, you know what, I think I'll just either run away with her or I'll wait until something happens to Leah so I can marry Rachel, he gets two of them, and then that creates problems. It was very interesting, somewhere in these notes, because part of the notes was written in 2016. I wrote them in 2016. And I think Kitty and I were married then. And I had written down, my wife believes every man is just like any of these guys. We're all pigs. Because we would marry... do you want me to speed it up? Kitty wants me to speed it up. Here we go. Okay. Sorry, Leon. We're speeding it up. I got to get after it. Okay. So far, what have we found about our hero? So far, we know that he's a Levite. He has got two wives. He's got one named Rachel. He's got one named Peninnah. Peninnah has a lot of kids. Hannah has none. And so when you get to 3, now here we go. We find out more about him. Now this man would go up from his city yearly, every year, to worship and to sacrifice to the Lord of hosts in Shiloh. Now if you've been studying Old Testament very much, you know that Shiloh was where the tabernacle, how do you pronounce that? It's the temple, but it's not the temple because it's a tent. It's before Solomon built the temple. And this is what they would take up every time when they were moving over the 40 years. It's up there. The Ark of the Covenant is up there. And that's where you're supposed to go have your feast and honor the Lord. And this guy is doing that every year. He doesn't say, oh, I got to go play golf or I don't feel good. He's going up there to do it. It's about 15 or 20 miles from where his house is. And so he goes up there to worship and to sacrifice to the Lord of hosts in Shiloh. And the two sons of Eli, we suddenly hear this name Eli. Where does it come before? I told you that he was a priest, but also was one of the judges. The two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were priests to the Lord there. Now, if you want to talk about Catholic priests and some of the bad things they have done, they don't hold a candle to these two guys. And we're going to find that as we get deeper in here. And this is part of what is wrong at that time in this earth. And that was the corruption that just permeated all different levels. And the same thing is true with us today. Corruption, corruption, corruption. And so as we get into this, they're putting us on notice. So he goes on up there to worship. I want to be careful. Let me see. This is a feast where the people giving the sacrifice, the meat, give a third to God, a third to the priest, and they get to keep a third. The family gets to keep a third. So they have a big barbecue, Leon, just like you're talking about. They'd love to have your barbecue pit there to where they could cook all this stuff. And so this is going to be something that's important to us, because what happens to the third that this gentleman and his family get to keep? Does he eat it all? No, we're going to find out he doesn't. And so then when you go into 4, when the day came that Elkanah, I'm going to say again, sacrificed, so he's gone with his family, he would give portions to Peninnah, his wife, and to all her sons and her daughters. So he's got multiple children from this second wife. And so he's doing what should do. He's giving her part of his third of the sacrifice. And then what you get into, the important part is number 5. But to Hannah, he would give a double portion, for he loved Hannah, but the Lord had closed her womb. So boy, you talk about a sentence that has a lot in it. He gives to his second wife, who has all the kids, a portion, but he gives twice that to Hannah, who has no kids. And he does it because he loves her. Well, what does that make you think his feelings for his second wife are? Does he love her? Perhaps, but not to the extent that he loves Hannah. And then we find out why Hannah can't have kids. You know, God is saying to her, without her knowing about it, it's not time. And that's what he says to all of us. We pray for things that we want. Sometimes we get them, but most of the times we don't. Sometimes we get them not when we want them or would like to have them, but when we don't expect them. And the thing we have to remember is that God makes these decisions. And he made a decision that Hannah was not going to have children, at least not at this particular point in her life. And so then you get to 6, and you come in here, say her rival, you know who her rival is now, the other wife. Her rival, however, would provoke her, Hannah, would provoke Hannah bitterly and irritate her, because the Lord had closed her womb. So can't you just imagine this? Okay? And I don't even know Peninnah, and I'm talking bad about her. Her name means pearl, I think it was, or jewel or something. And from everything we read, she wasn't much of a jewel. I think she was kind of a fake jewel, because she doesn't sympathize with Hannah on the fact that Hannah can't have kids. And this has been going on a long time. She provokes her. She does it. It'd be just like me picking on my wife. And I never do that, as y'all well know. Not with an evil intent, obviously. Right, Kitty? Yeah, right. Kitty said, yes, honey. I just want y'all to know that. So, she's provoking her. And she's doing it because Hannah can't have kids. Hannah, I sure wish you could have kids. I got 6 of them running around here. Would you want to babysit for me? You want to go to the zoo with them? You want to do all of this stuff? I'm so proud of my kids. And of course, I think that one thing we need to realize is at this point in time, none of those children were teenagers. Because had they been teenagers, probably there would be a completely different story. But they weren't. And so this is a time that Hannah is suffering and suffering. And it doesn't just happen for a day or two or a week or two or a month or two. It happens for years. And we're told that. When we get into this thing in number 7, it happened year after year. As often as they went up to the house of the Lord, in other words, made this yearly pilgrimage to sacrifice, she, Peninnah, would provoke her, Hannah. The result was that Hannah wept and would not eat. So just think the effect this has. Now, this kind of makes us think that perhaps the only time Peninnah would do this was when they were going up to do the sacrifice in Shiloh. I doubt that was really true. I just can't believe for all the other months of the year that she was just a wonderful person and they had a great relationship. Now, logically, they're leaving their tent or their home or whatever, and they're going to a different place. They're closer to each other. They get on each other's nerves, probably a little bit more than they would at home. But this is years and years. Now, the question is, what's Hannah doing? All of this time, her husband marries Peninnah. They start popping out those kids. Hannah's looking at that. Is Hannah jealous? Is it Hannah the one that's trying to provoke Peninnah, saying, oh, you've gotten fat since you've been having these kids? Is she doing things like that? No, apparently not. But the important thing is she praying? We aren't told that here. We aren't told whether or not the way she was dealing with this trauma that she was facing from this other wife was to turn to God. Or did she turn to her husband? And if she did, what was the conversation they had? I can just hear it. Is it, well, you shouldn't have ever married her? And he's saying, well, I had to do it because if I didn't do it, I wouldn't have an heir. I got to have somebody to leave all my money to. And that would just create more of a problem. Well, then you get into 8. Then Helican, I've called him 4 different things so far. Echiglin, 5 different things. Her husband said to her, now here's husbands. And every husband in here, and this is, if this was a men's class, we would stop and we would start talking about the problem that men have in trying to solve their wife's problems. Y'all don't want us to solve your problems. I've been married now for 40 or 50 years, something like that. And it's tough. I make a living solving problems. And I think I'm pretty rational. That isn't what I'm asked to do. I'm asked to sit there and I'm asked to listen to a person I love, tell me the people that are abusing her, tell me the problems that she has, and I'm not supposed to correct them. So he's going to make an effort here. And look how he does. Is this the way? Don't any of you guys ever do this the way he's doing it. So this is 8. He says to her, Hannah, why do you weep? And why do you not eat? And why is your heart sad? And Hannah ought to be looking at him and saying, you idiot, I've been this way for years and years and years. Your other wife is the reason for it. It's no secret. What are you saying to me? So he gets off on, you never want to ask a question that you don't know the answer to already. Well, he apparently didn't, because then he compounds it by saying, am I not better to you than 10 sons? He just admitted, I know why you weep. I know why you don't eat. It's because you don't have any kids. But hey, I'm better than 1, 2, or 10 of them. Really, aren't I? Well, what did she do? Anybody want to guess what Hannah did? Hannah decides, to heck with you. Number 9, then Hannah rose. Now here's interesting. After eating and drinking in Shiloh. Now, does that mean that Hannah ate and drank after her husband asked these questions and made that dumb statement? Because before it told us she didn't eat, that she was so upset she couldn't eat. So I don't know if that means, I couldn't find an answer to this. I don't know if that means after the family finished their meal and she still didn't partake in it, or if it means that she had come to a decision. And the decision was that I'm not going to do this anymore. Now, for those of us that live in this world, that decision would be, where's the nearest lawyer? I'm filing for a divorce. No, not Hannah. Hannah, she gets up, and then we get into Eli again. Remember, we've only heard Eli has these 2 sons that are priests, and he's a priest. Now, Eli the priest was sitting on the seat by the doorpost of the temple of the Lord. And again, this isn't really the temple. They're in Shiloh. This is not the temple. The temple is going to be in Jerusalem. So they're telling us Eli is there. Well, why is Eli there? Eli is there because he's going to show us that he's just much of a dumb man as we are, really and truly. Because here's what happens, and this is the part that really gets to all of us. Because Hannah has reached the point that she says, I can't handle this myself. I'm going to God. Now, hopefully she had been trying to do that for a long time. But I don't know about you guys, but I know me, and I will try to solve every problem I face and will make myself almost sick doing it before I finally say, you know what, I'm a dummy. I need to go to God. And then I finally will, and I will at least get the peace of mind of expressing myself. So here's what happens then. So, 1040 what? 1045. Okay, thank you. Here's where you find out if I really have any guts or not.
I'm just doing what you asked me to do.
I know, and I appreciate you doing that. So here's 10. She's greatly distressed, and what does she do? She prays to the Lord, and she weeps bitterly. So she's gone to the tabernacle. Eli's there sitting down, probably just kind of dozing off. She comes up there, and she's weeping bitterly. She starts praying, and now she makes a vow, and vows are very important. This is a blood oath, and says, O Lord of hosts, if you will indeed look on the affliction of your maidservant, that's her, and remember me, and do not forget your maidservant, but give your maidservant a son. I want a son, God, please give me a son, and I'm telling you what I'm going to do. If you give me a son, I'll be good the rest of my life. No, that's not what she says. If you give me a son, I'll give you more money every time I go to church. I'll tithe more. That's not what she says either. She comes in and she says, then I will give him, the son, to the Lord all the days of his life, and a razor shall never come on his head. What a pronouncement. What a vow. Because she basically has said, if you'll give me a son, I'm going to give him back to you. And what's more important is he's going to be a Nazarene, which is people that could make a commitment to God, and they would never shave, and that's the reason why it talks about a razor on their head. They never would drink alcohol of any type, or even fermented grapes, or even the skins of grapes. I can't do that. But also, and there's a guy named Samson that's the same type of guy, you can't get close to a body. It doesn't matter whether it's human, doesn't matter whether it's animal, doesn't matter whether it's somebody you love or hate. You can't do it. Okay, so now, we keep going because I don't care that it's 10, 15 minutes still. So, I am getting to a stopping point. And I do teach next week, so I'll hit the rest of it. 12 comes and says, now it came about as she continued praying before the Lord that Eli was watching her mouth. Okay, he's sitting there, he's watching her mouth. As for Hannah, she was speaking in her heart. Only her lips were moving. Her voice was not heard. So Eli thought she was drunk. And we're going to stop after Eli here. So 14. Then Eli said to her, how long will you make yourself drunk? Put away your wine from you. Now, isn't that a wonderful thing for the head priest to say to one of his parishioners? Because he sees her mouthing something and he thinks she's drunk. Well, one reason she thinks she's drunk is that back in those days, when you pray, you prayed long and you prayed loud because you want everybody to hear you. You want them to know how wonderful you are. So we'll stop there, even though I don't want to, but Leon's talking me into it. So let me do a quick prayer. And I think Kenny's starting Thessalonians. So as he does, remember that's what I really wanted to teach, because we would have been through with this lesson had I done that. So let's go ahead and pray. Father, we do appreciate you more than we can ever express. I think most of us will admit that we're a little concerned about the way our country seems to be going down the wrong path as far as the division of its citizens. We all need to be praying to you, and I pray for all who have yet to accept the gospel of your Son and the sacrifice that he made, that they do so today. And for all of us, I pray you will motivate us to study your word daily and to pray to you daily and to focus on our relationship with you. And I do pray for Kenny as he preaches this next hour, and I have great confidence that he will say just the things we need to hear in order to motivate us to be more focused on you. And also, if there be anyone there who has not accepted the free gift of salvation, that they may start thinking of doing it. I pray for all of this in your Son's precious name. Amen. Thank you. Somebody remember where we stopped.